The radio crackled with static as two F-22 Raptors streaked through the Nevada sky at 40,000 feet. Captain Blake Morrison and Lieutenant Jake Sullivan had seen everything in their combined 20 years of flying, but nothing had prepared them for what they were about to witness. A civilian aircraft was rapidly losing altitude, its transponder showing a passenger manifest with no qualified pilots aboard. What they didn't know was that among those passengers sat someone whose call sign would soon echo through the cockpits of America's most elite fighter jets and change everything they thought they knew about who belongs in the sky. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning of September 15th began like any other at Nellis Air Force Base. Captain Blake Morrison was completing his pre-flight checklist when the scramble alarm pierced the desert silence. Within minutes, he and his wingman, Lieutenant Jake Sullivan, were racing toward their F-22 Raptors, their boots pounding against the scorching tarmac. "Control. Viper 1 ready for takeoff," Morrison radioed, his hands moving with practiced precision across the cockpit controls. "Viper 2, ready," Sullivan confirmed from the adjacent aircraft. The mission briefing had been straightforward. A civilian Cessna Citation had declared an emergency 200 miles northeast of Las Vegas. Engine failure, rapid altitude loss, and according to air traffic control, no qualified pilot aboard. It was supposed to be a routine escort mission to guide the aircraft to the nearest suitable airport and provide assistance until emergency crews could take over. As the two Raptors climbed through the crystalline morning air, Morrison couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. Something about this emergency didn't add up. The Cessna's flight plan showed it had departed from a small private airfield in Colorado, bound for San Diego. The passenger manifest listed 8 souls aboard, a business delegation heading to a corporate retreat. "Viper 1, this is Control. We're getting intermittent radio contact from the civilian aircraft. Appears to be a passenger attempting communication," Morrison frowned. In his 15 years of flying, he'd responded to dozens of civilian emergencies. Passengers rarely had the knowledge or composure to operate aircraft communications equipment, especially during a crisis. "Copy that, Control. Viper flight is approaching intercept. Coordinates." The Nevada landscape stretched endlessly below them, a tapestry of rust-colored mountains and vast stretches of desert, punctuated by the occasional mining operation. At their altitude, the curvature of the earth was clearly visible, a reminder of just how high they were flying and how far the civilian aircraft had to fall. "Viper 1, civilian aircraft on your 2 o'clock. Descending through flight level 270, Morrison banked slightly and spotted the small white dot against the blue sky. Even from a distance, he could see the Cessna's erratic flight path, the telltale signs of an aircraft in serious trouble. "Viper 2, let's close the gap." Standard escort formation. As they approached, Morrison could make out more details of the struggling aircraft. The Cessna Citation was a mid-size business jet, probably worth several $1,000,000, but right now it looked fragile and vulnerable against the vast sky. Smoke was trailing from the left engine, and the aircraft was losing altitude at an alarming rate. "Civilian aircraft, this is Air Force Viper 1. Do you copy?" Static filled the radio channel for several seconds. Then, unexpectedly, a clear, calm voice responded. "Viper 1, this is Cessna November 7 Charlie Delta. We have engine failure and are attempting emergency landing procedures." Morrison exchanged a glance with his wingman, though neither could see the other through their canopies. The voice was female, composed, and using proper radio protocol, not what they'd expect from a panicked passenger. "November-7-Charlie-Delta, what is your pilot status?" Another pause. "Viper 1, our pilot became incapacitated approximately 15 minutes ago. I'm doing my best to maintain control. Sullivan's voice crackled through the intercom. "Blake, did she just say she's flying that thing?" Morrison was thinking the same thing. The woman's voice carried an undertone of familiarity with aviation terminology that seemed impossible for a civilian passenger. But there was something in her tone that reminded him of the radio discipline he'd heard countless times in military operations. November-7-Charlie-Delta. What is your aviation experience? The response came without hesitation. Limited, Viper 1, but I'm managing. Limited. The word struck Morrison as odd. Someone with limited experience wouldn't sound so controlled while attempting to fly a sophisticated business jet with a failed engine. Someone with limited experience would be screaming into the radio, or, more likely, wouldn't be able to operate the radio at all. As the two F-22s took up escort positions on either side of the Cessna, Morrison got his first clear look at the aircraft's cockpit. Through the small windows, he could make out a figure in the pilot's seat, definitely female, with dark hair pulled back. Her movements seemed deliberate and practiced as she worked the controls. Viper flight. Be advised, civilian aircraft is now descending through flight level 200. The closest suitable airport is Henderson Executive, bearing 270. 43 miles. Morrison did quick calculations in his head. At the Cessna's current rate of descent and forward speed, reaching Henderson would be tight, very tight. November 7 Charlie Delta. Henderson Executive Airport is your best option. Can you maintain the current heading? Affirmative, Viper 1. Attempting to restart the left engine. The professionalism in her voice was unmistakable now. Morrison had flown alongside enough pilots to recognize the signs. The way she acknowledged instructions, her use of proper terminology, even her breathing pattern over the radio. This wasn't a passenger-plane pilot. This was someone who knew what she was doing. "Jake," Morrison called to his wingman on the private channel. "Something's not adding up here. You thinking what I'm thinking? That our passenger isn't exactly who she claims to be?" "Yeah." They watched as the Cessna maintained a surprisingly stable glide path despite the failed engine. The aircraft's nose was slightly low, proper technique for maximizing glide distance, and the wings remained level despite what must have been significant control pressures from the asymmetric power situation. Control. Viper 1. Request any additional information on passengers aboard November 7 Charlie Delta. Stand by. Viper 1. As they continued their escort, Morrison found himself studying the Cessna's flight characteristics more closely. The pilot, whoever she really was doing everything right. Engine failure procedures, proper radio protocol, optimal glide configuration. This wasn't luck or beginner's fortune. This was a skill. Viper 1, control. The passenger manifest shows 8 souls aboard, including the flight crew. Business delegation from Quantum Defense Solutions, bound for San Diego. Quantum Defense Solutions. Morrison recognized the name, a major defense contractor that worked closely with the Air Force on classified projects. The pieces were starting to fit together, though the picture they formed was still unclear. November 7 Charlie Delta. How many passengers and crew aboard? 8 in total, Viper 1. 7 passengers. 1 flight crew member currently incapacitated. Morrison caught the subtle distinction. She hadn't said she was a passenger. She'd said there was 7 passengers and 1 incapacitated crew member, which suggested ... double quotes control. Viper 1. Requesting background check on Cessna crew and passenger list. Priority. Copy. Viper 1. Running checks now. The 3 aircraft continued their descent toward Henderson Executive Airport. At 15,000 feet, the details of the Nevada landscape became clearer. Morrison could see the airport in the distance, a small controlled field with adequate runways for the Cessna, assuming they could reach it. November 7 Charlie Delta. Henderson Executive Airport is now visible. Bearing 265, range 28 miles. Runway 03 is active. Wind 040 at 8 knots. Copy. Viper 1, I have the field in sight. Again, that professional acknowledgement. Morrison was now certain they weren't escorting a panicked passenger attempting a miracle landing. They were escorting a pilot, but who was she? And why had she initially presented herself as just a passenger? Viper 1, this is Control with background information. Cessna flight crew consists of Captain Robert Hayes, 22 years commercial aviation experience. Clean record, current medical. What about passengers control? Quantum Defense Solutions Delegation, all cleared personnel. Names include Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Project Director. Thomas Chun, Systems Engineer. Colonel Retired Amanda Torres, Liaison Officer. Morrison's attention sharpened. A retired colonel. That would explain the radio discipline and aviation knowledge. But why hadn't she identified herself properly from the beginning? Control, can you provide more details on Colonel Torres? Stand by, Viper 1. Accessing classified personnel files. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As they approached Henderson Executive, the Cessna continued its professional descent. The mysterious woman in the cockpit was setting up for what appeared to be a textbook single-engine approach. Her altitude management was precise, her heading constant, and her airspeed exactly where it needed to be. November 7 Charlie Delta, you're looking good for runway 03. Emergency equipment is standing by. Roger. Viper 1. Thank you for the escort. There was something in her voice now, a slight change in tone, that Morrison couldn't quite identify. Not quite a relief, but something close to it. And something else. Something that sounded almost like ... Viper 1 Control. Background check complete on Colonel Amanda Torres. Air Force Academy graduate, 23 years active duty. Former F-16 pilot, later transitioned to test pilot program at Edwards. Last assignment, Classified Fighter Development Program. Retired 18 months ago with full honors. Morrison felt his breath catch. A test pilot. Not just any pilot, a test pilot from Edwards Air Force Base, where the most advanced aircraft in the world were developed and tested. Someone who had likely flown aircraft that made his F-22 look primitive. Jake, did you copy that? Holy shit, Blake. Our passenger is a fighter pilot. The revelation changed everything. This wasn't a civilian emergency anymore. This was a fellow aviator, a member of the Brotherhood of Military Pilots, who for some reason had chosen to maintain her cover as just a passenger. But why? The Henderson Executive Airport Control Tower was a buzz of activity as the emergency unfolded. Air Traffic Controller Maria Gonzalez had been managing the airspace for 8 years, but she'd never coordinated a landing quite like this one. 2 F-22. Raptors flanking a disabled business jet wasn't something covered in standard training procedures. Emergency vehicles are in position, SHE announced over the radio. Runway 03 is clear and available. From his position at 8,000 feet, Morrison watched Amanda Torres begin her final approach. The Cessna's descent was textbook perfect, a steady 3-degree glide slope that would bring her to the runway threshold with minimal adjustments needed. For someone claiming limited aviation experience, her performance was nothing short of masterful. November 7 Charlie Delta, you're cleared to land runway 03. Wind 040 at 6 knots, gusting to 12. Cleared to land 03. November 7 Charlie Delta. Sullivan's voice crackled through Morrison's headset on their private frequency. Blake, watch how she's handling those wind corrections. That's not passenger-level flying. Morrison had noticed it too. The subtle aileron inputs, the way she was crabbing slightly into the crosswind, the precise power management on the single functioning engine. These were the skills of someone who had logged serious flight hours in challenging conditions. As the Cessna descended through 5,000 feet, Morrison noticed something else. Through the cockpit windows he could see Amanda's posture and movements. There was no panic, no frantic gesturing or erratic control inputs. Instead, she sat with the composed bearing of a professional pilot, her head moving in systematic scans of her instruments and the runway environment ahead. Control. Viper 1 requesting permission to maintain escort through touchdown. Approved. Viper 1. Emergency frequency is 121.5. For coordination with ground units, the two F-22s maintained their positions slightly above and behind the Cessna as it continued its approach. At 3,000 feet, Amanda's voice came over the radio again. And this time Morrison detected something he hadn't heard before, a slight tension that suggested she was dealing with more than just this single engine failure. Viper 1. I'm getting intermittent hydraulic pressure warnings. The primary system is showing fluctuations. Morrison felt his stomach tighten. A hydraulic failure on top of an engine failure could turn a manageable emergency into a catastrophe. Without proper hydraulic pressure, controlling the aircraft's flight surfaces became exponentially more difficult. November-7-Charlie-Delta. Can you maintain control authority? Affirmative for now, but I'm having to use increased control pressure. The aircraft is getting heavier on the controls. Sullivan keyed his mic. Blake, if she loses hydraulics completely ... double quotes. Morrison didn't need him to finish the thought. A complete hydraulic failure in a business jet typically meant an almost uncontrollable aircraft. The fact that Amanda was managing to maintain precise control while dealing with both engine and hydraulic problems spoke to skills that went far beyond anything a civilian passenger should possess. Control. Viper 1. Be advised the civilian aircraft is reporting hydraulic system anomalies in addition to engine failure. Request full emergency response. Copy Viper 1. Alerting fire and rescue. Medical teams are already standing by. At 2,000 feet above ground level, the Cessna was committed to Henderson Executive Airport. There were no other options now. Amanda would have to put the aircraft down on runway 03 or risk a catastrophic off-airport landing in the Nevada desert. Morrison watched as she configured the aircraft for landing. The landing gear came down, a good sign that at least some hydraulic systems were still functioning. The flaps extended to their landing position, though Morrison noticed they seemed to deploy more slowly than normal. Another indication of hydraulic system degradation. November-7-Charlie-Delta. Gear appears down and locked from external observation. Confirmed. Viper 1. 3 green lights. Continuing approach. The professionalism in her voice remained steady, but Morrison could hear the increased concentration. Every pilot knew that the final moments of an emergency approach were the most critical. One mistake, one momentary lapse in judgment, and the situation could spiral beyond recovery. At 1,000 feet above the runway, something changed. The Cessna's nose attitude shifted slightly, and Morrison saw Amanda's silhouette in the cockpit react with what looked like increased control inputs. Viper 1. I'm losing aileron authority. Having to use the rudder to maintain wings level, Morrison's blood ran cold. Loss of aileron control was a pilot's nightmare scenario. Without ailerons maintaining lateral control of an aircraft became a delicate balance of rudder, inputs and power management skills that typically took years to master and were rarely needed outside of emergency situations or advanced test. Flying. November-7-Charlie-Delta. Can you maintain the approach path? Affirmative, but it's going to be a firm landing. Advising passengers to brace for impact. Through their headsets, Morrison and Sullivan could hear Amanda's voice in the background, addressing the passengers in the cabin. Her tone was calm and authoritative as she gave brief, clear instructions for emergency landing procedures. Even in the midst of a cascading system failure, she was managing both the aircraft and the passenger briefing with the composed efficiency of an experienced airline. Captain, Control, Viper flight. Civilian aircraft are experiencing multiple system failures but maintaining approach. The pilot appears to have the situation under control. Roger. Viper 1. All emergency equipment is in position and ready. At 500 feet above the runway, the Cessna hit turbulence from the desert thermals. Morrison watched as Amanda fought to keep the wings level, using only rudder and throttle adjustments on her single functioning engine. The aircraft wallowed slightly, then steadied as she made the necessary corrections. "Beautiful flying," Sullivan muttered over the intercom. "Whoever she is, she's got serious stick and rudder skills," Morrison agreed. What he was witnessing wasn't just competent emergency flying. It was the kind of masterful aircraft control that came from years of experience in challenging conditions. The kind of experience that a test pilot would accumulate during their career, pushing aircraft to their limits and learning to recover from every conceivable system failure. At 200 feet, Amanda's voice came over the radio one final time before touchdown. "Viper 1, thank you for the escort. It's been an honor flying with you." The phrase struck Morrison as odd. Flying with you was terminology used between military pilots, a recognition of shared experience and mutual respect. It wasn't something a civilian would typically say to fighter pilots during an emergency. The Cessna crossed the runway threshold at exactly the right altitude and airspeed. Amanda flared the aircraft with a precise pull on the yoke, bleeding off speed and settling the main landing gear onto the asphalt with barely a thump. The nose wheel touched down seconds later, and she immediately deployed the speed brakes and began heavy braking. Without aileron control, keeping the aircraft tracking straight down the runway centerline required constant rudder corrections. Morrison watched in fascination as Amanda managed each small deviation with smooth, measured inputs. The Cessna rolled out straight and true, coming to a stop well before the runway's midpoint. November-7-Charlie-Delta is down and stopped on runway 03. Morrison reported to air traffic control. "Beautiful landing." Emergency vehicles immediately surrounded the Cessna. Fire trucks positioned themselves alongside the aircraft while paramedics approached the passenger door. Morrison and Sullivan maintained their overhead orbit, watching as the drama played out on the ground below. The passenger door opened, and Morrison could see figures emerging from the aircraft. First came what appeared to be business-dress civilians, probably the Quantum Defense Solutions delegation. Then came a man being assisted by paramedics, likely the incapacitated pilot. Finally, Amanda Torres stepped down from the aircraft. Even from 1,000 feet altitude, Morrison could see that her movements were controlled and purposeful. She spoke briefly with the emergency responders, gestured toward the aircraft's engines, and appeared to be providing a technical debrief of the aircraft's condition. Her body language was that of someone accustomed to post-flight procedures and emergency protocols. Viper flight control. Civilian aircraft are secure. Emergency is terminated. You're cleared to return to base when ready. Morrison was about to acknowledge when his radio crackled with an unexpected transmission on the emergency frequency. Viper 1. This is November 7 Charlie Delta ground. Request a brief frequency change to discuss aircraft status. Morrison frowned. Post-emergency communications typically went through air traffic control or base operations, not directly between pilots. But something in Amanda's voice suggested this wasn't a standard request. November 7 Charlie Delta. Switch to frequency 2-5-4-point-3. Double quotes. Morrison and Sullivan both changed to the discrete frequency. After a moment, Amanda's voice came through clearly. "Viper flight, this is Colonel Torres. I wanted to thank you personally for the professional escort and assistance." There it was. She had finally identified herself by rank and name. But Morrison sensed there was more to come. "Colonel Torres, it was our honor to assist. That was exceptional flying under extremely challenging conditions. Thank you, Captain Morrison." I recognized your call sign from the Edwards test program files. You flew chase on several of our classified missions 3 years ago. Morrison felt his heart skip. How could she possibly know that? Those missions were highly classified, and pilot assignments weren't included in standard personnel files. Only someone with direct involvement in the test programs would have access to that information. Ma'am, I'm not sure I understand ... Captain. My call sign during my test pilot days was Phoenix. I was the primary pilot on Project Nighthawk from 2019, 2023. The words hit Morrison like a physical blow. Project Nighthawk was one of the most classified programs in Air Force history. If Amanda Torres had been the primary test pilot, she hadn't just flown advanced aircraft, she had been responsible for testing the next generation of fighters that would eventually replace the F-22. Sullivan's voice was barely a whisper on the intercom. Blake, did she just say what I think she said? Morrison's mind raced. Project Nighthawk was so classified that even most F-22 pilots didn't know it existed. The fact that Amanda had just referenced it over an open radio frequency meant either she was cleared to discuss it, or the situation had somehow become serious enough to warrant breaking protocol. Colonel Torres, understand you were primarily on that program? Affirmative, Captain. Which is why I need to speak with you and Lieutenant Sullivan immediately after you land. This emergency wasn't accidental. The words sent a chill down Morrison's spine. Not accidental? What did that mean? Had someone deliberately sabotaged the Cessna? And if so, why was a retired test pilot from one of the most classified programs in military history aboard the aircraft when it happened? Ma'am, are you saying ... Captain, I'm saying that Quantum Defense Solutions has been compromised, and the people who orchestrated today's emergency are probably monitoring our communications right now. Land immediately and meet me at the base security office. Tell no one else about this conversation. Morrison felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with transitioning from routine mission to potential combat situation. If Amanda Torres was right, they had just stumbled into something much larger and more dangerous than a simple aircraft emergency. Understood, Colonel. Viper flight returning to base immediately. Captain, one more thing. When you file your mission report, list me only as a passenger who assisted with radio communications. My actual identity and background remain classified until we can determine the scope of this situation. Copy that. Ma'am. As Morrison and Sullivan turned their F-22s toward Nellis Air Force Base, Morrison's mind was spinning with questions. What was Project Nighthawk? Why had someone apparently tried to kill Amanda Torres and the Quantum Defense Solutions team? And most importantly, what did Amanda know that made her important enough to target for assassination? The Nevada desert streaked beneath them as they climbed back to cruising altitude. What had begun as a routine emergency escort had suddenly become something much more complex and potentially dangerous. Morrison had the distinct feeling that their involvement in this situation was far from over. In fact, he suspected it was just beginning. The security office at Nellis Air Force Base was a nondescript building that most personnel passed without a second glance. But behind its unremarkable exterior lay some of the most sophisticated counterintelligence facilities in the military. As Morrison and Sullivan approached the entrance, they were met by 2 Air Force Security Forces personnel who had clearly been expecting them. Captain Morrison, Lieutenant Sullivan, Colonel Torres is waiting in the Delta conference room. You'll need to surrender all electronic devices and sign additional security documentation. Morrison exchanged a glance with Sullivan. Additional security protocols meant they were about to enter a compartmentalized briefing, the kind reserved for operations, that existed in the shadows of official military records. After completing the security procedures, they were escorted down a corridor lined with reinforced doors, each marked only with letters and numbers that revealed nothing about their purpose. Conference Room Delta was larger than Morrison had expected. Equipped with sophisticated electronic countermeasure equipment and multiple secure communication systems, Amanda Torres stood at the far end of a polished conference table, but she looked nothing like the composed pilot who had just executed an emergency landing. Gone was any pretense of civilian appearance. She wore a crisp Air Force uniform with colonel's eagles, and her bearing was unmistakably that of a senior military officer. Standing beside her was a man in his 50s wearing the stars of a brigadier general, Captain Morrison. "Lieutenant Sullivan, thank you for responding so quickly. I'm General Marcus Webb, Director of Special Programs. Please have a seat." As they settled into chairs around the conference table, Morrison noticed several classified document folders already arranged at each position. Whatever they were about to learn had been prepared in advance, which meant Amanda's emergency landing was just the beginning of a much larger operation. General Webb activated a device that filled the room with a subtle white noise designed to defeat electronic surveillance. "Gentlemen, what you're about to hear is classified at the highest levels. Colonel Torres, please proceed with your briefing." Amanda moved to a large display screen that descended from the ceiling. With the press of a button, a series of technical drawings appeared, aircraft schematics unlike anything Morrison had ever seen. Project Nighthawk was initiated 5 years ago with a specific mission: develop the next generation of air superiority fighters. The aircraft you're looking at is designated the F-35X, a hybrid design that combines stealth capabilities with unprecedented maneuverability and weapons systems. The images showed an aircraft that seemed to blur the line between current fighter technology and science fiction. Its angular, faceted surfaces were clearly designed for stealth, but the engine configuration and control surfaces suggested performance capabilities that would make even the F-22 seem outdated. The F-35X incorporates breakthrough technologies in several areas, Amanda continued. Advanced metamaterial stealth coatings that can adapt their radar signature in real time, directed energy weapon systems, and most importantly, artificial intelligence-assisted flight control systems that allow the aircraft to perform maneuvers beyond human physiological limits. Sullivan leaned forward in his chair. "Ma'am, are you saying this aircraft can outfly anything we currently have?" "Lieutenant, I'm saying this aircraft can outfly anything anyone currently has." In testing, the F-35X demonstrated air-to-air combat capabilities that rendered existing fighter aircraft effectively obsolete. It's not just better than current fighters, it's a completely different category of weapon system. Morrison studied the technical specifications displayed on the screen. The performance numbers were staggering. Maximum speed of Mach 3.2, operational ceiling of 70,000 feet, and combat radius exceeding 1,200 nautical miles. But more impressive were the weapons systems. The aircraft could carry directed energy weapons that could disable enemy aircraft without destroying them, and electronic warfare capabilities that could render entire air defense systems useless. General Webb stepped forward. Colonel Torres was the primary test pilot for this program. Over 3 years, she logged more than 400 flight hours in the F-35X, pushing its capabilities to the absolute limits. The aircraft you see represents a technological leap equivalent to the transition from propeller fighters to jets in World War II. "Sir," Morrison said carefully, "I assume this technology is highly classified. Why are we being briefed on it now?" Amanda's expression darkened. "Because someone has been systematically targeting everyone involved in the program. In the past 6 months, 3 key engineers have died in what appeared to be accidents. 2 defense contractors working on critical systems have suffered cyber attacks that destroyed years of research. And yesterday, we learned that classified F-35X technical data has appeared on foreign intelligence networks." Implications hit Morrison like a cold wave. "You're saying there's a deliberate effort to steal or destroy this program?" "Captain, I'm saying there's a coordinated intelligence operation being conducted against the United States that makes previous espionage cases look like amateur hour. Today's incident with the Cessna was an assassination attempt designed to eliminate the remaining personnel who have detailed knowledge of the F-35X systems. General Webb moved to another display panel. At 0630 this morning, NSA intercepts detected unusual electronic communications originating from the Henderson Executive Airport area. The signals matched patterns associated with remote aircraft system interference. Essentially, someone was attempting to hack into the Cessna's flight management systems. Morrison felt his mouth go dry. "Sir, are you saying the engine failure was caused by a cyber attack?" "Not just the engine failure, Captain. Analysis of the aircraft's electronic systems after landing revealed malware designed to create cascading system failures at a predetermined time and location. The attackers wanted to ensure the aircraft would crash in a remote area where there would be no survivors and minimal investigation." Sullivan's voice was barely above a whisper. "But Colonel Torres managed to land the aircraft anyway." Amanda nodded grimly. "The attackers made two critical errors. First, they assumed I was just another civilian passenger and wouldn't be able to respond to the emergency. Second, they didn't account for the fact that test pilots are trained to handle multiple simultaneous system failures. That would defeat most aviators." General Webb brought up a new set of images, satellite photographs, showing various locations around the world. "Based on the communication intercepts and technical analysis of the malware, we've identified the source of these attacks. The operation is being conducted by a joint intelligence effort involving Russian SVR, Chinese MSS, and what appears to be a previously unknown private military organization with significant technological capabilities." Morrison studied the satellite images. They showed facilities in Russia, China, and several other locations he couldn't immediately identify. The scale of the operation was staggering. This wasn't just espionage. It was a coordinated international effort to either steal or destroy one of America's most advanced military programs. "Sir, what's the current status of the F-35X program?" Amanda and General Webb exchanged a glance before Amanda responded. "Captain, the program officially doesn't exist. According to all public records, the F-35X was never built. The aircraft I tested, the technology we developed, the personnel involved, none of it appears in any official documentation." Morrison felt confusion replace his initial shock. "Ma'am, I don't understand. How can a program this advanced be completely off the books?" "Because, Captain, the F-35X program was designed from the beginning to be what we call a black project, so classified that even most senior military leadership doesn't know it exists. The technology is so advanced that its mere existence would destabilize current international power balances." General Webb activated another display showing a global map with various marked locations. The F-35X represents what military analysts call a paradigm shift capability. Any nation that possesses this technology would have immediate and overwhelming air superiority over any potential adversary. The aircraft doesn't just outperform existing fighters, it renders them completely ineffective. Sullivan raised his hand. "Sir, if the technology is that advanced, why keep it secret? Wouldn't revealing its existence serve as a deterrent?" Amanda smiled grimly. "Lieutenant, the problem with paradigm shift technologies is that they create instability. If our adversaries knew we possessed fighters that could defeat their entire air forces without losses, they would be forced to either develop countermeasures immediately or consider alternative strategies, including preemptive nuclear strikes." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Morrison had never considered that advanced military technology could actually increase the risk of conflict rather than deterring it. General Webb continued. "Which brings us to the current crisis. Someone has learned about the F-35X program and is systematically trying to steal or destroy it. Today's assassination attempt against Colonel Torres was part of a larger effort to eliminate everyone who has detailed knowledge of the aircraft's capabilities. Morrison leaned back in his chair, trying to process the implications. "Sir, what exactly are you asking us to do? We're fighter pilots, not intelligence operatives. Captain, we're asking you to help us protect the most advanced military technology ever developed by the United States. The people behind today's attack won't stop with Colonel Torres. They'll continue targeting F-35X personnel until they either steal the technology or ensure that no one else can use it." Amanda moved to stand directly in front of Morrison and Sullivan. "Gentlemen, I need to ask you both a direct question, and I need completely honest answers. Are you willing to participate in a classified operation to protect this technology, knowing that it will involve significant personal risk and may require actions that go beyond normal military protocols?" Morrison looked at Sullivan, seeing his own mixture of apprehension and determination reflected in his wingman's expression. They had joined the Air Force to defend their country, but neither had imagined they would be asked to protect secrets that could change the balance of global military power. "Ma'am," Morrison said slowly, "what exactly would this operation involve?" General Webb stepped forward. "Captain, we need you to help us conduct a counterintelligence operation designed to identify and neutralize the people behind today's attack. This will involve using you and Lieutenant Sullivan as operational assets in what will appear to be routine training missions, but will actually be surveillance and interdiction operations." Amanda's expression was serious. "Gentlemen, I won't lie to you. The people we're dealing with have already demonstrated they're willing to commit murder to achieve their objectives. If you agree to participate in this operation, you'll be placing yourselves in significant danger." Sullivan spoke for the first time in several minutes. "Colonel, with respect, isn't this exactly the kind of situation we trained for? Protecting advanced military technology from foreign adversaries? Lieutenant, this situation goes beyond anything you've trained for. The adversaries we're facing have resources and capabilities that rival those of nation-states. They've demonstrated the ability to conduct cyber attacks against military aircraft, coordinate international intelligence operations, and eliminate targets using methods that leave no evidence." Morrison felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Everything about this briefing suggested they were being asked to step outside the normal boundaries of military service into something resembling covert operations. But at the same time, the technology Amanda had described represented a crucial advantage for American national security. "Sir, if we agree to participate, what would be our first assignment?" General Webb smiled for the first time since the briefing began. "Captain, your first assignment would be to escort Colonel Torres on what will appear to be a routine test flight, but will actually be a mission to recover critical F-35X data from a secure facility that may have been compromised by enemy operatives." Amanda's expression was grim but determined. "Gentlemen, we're going to find out exactly who tried to kill us today, and we're going to make sure they never get another chance." Dawn was breaking over the Sierra Nevada mountains as Morrison and Sullivan completed their pre-flight inspections on two specially modified F-22 Raptors. To any casual observer, the aircraft looked identical to standard Raptors, but Morrison knew better. The modifications were subtle but significant: enhanced electronic warfare suites, experimental communication systems, and sensor packages that didn't appear in any technical manual. "Viper 1, come check." Amanda's voice crackled through Morrison's headset. She was piloting what appeared to be a standard T-38 trainer aircraft, but Morrison suspected it contained as many hidden modifications as their F-22s. "Viper 1 reads you 5x5. "Phoenix," Morrison replied, using Amanda's call sign for the first time. The familiarity felt strange, but General Webb had insisted they operate using standard flight procedures to maintain the appearance of a routine training exercise. "Viper 2. Good copy," Sullivan added from his cockpit. Their destination was Groom Lake, the legendary Area 51 facility in central Nevada. According to the mission briefing, a secure data repository that contained backup files from the F-35X program that needed to be retrieved before enemy operatives could access them. What made the mission particularly sensitive was intelligence suggesting that the facility itself might have been penetrated. As the three aircraft lifted off from Nellis and turned northwest toward the restricted airspace surrounding Groom Lake, Morrison reviewed the tactical situation in his mind. They weren't just flying a data recovery mission. They were potentially flying into a trap set by the same people who had tried to kill Amanda the day before. Phoenix, Viper flight is with you. Climbing to flight level 300. Copy, Viper flight. Be advised, we're entering communications blackout protocol in 30 seconds. Switch to encrypted tactical frequency Delta 7, Morrison. Changed frequencies to the classified channel that would shield their communications from conventional interception. The landscape below was the familiar terrain of the Nevada Test and Training Range, but today it felt different, hostile in a way it never had during routine training flights. Viper flight Phoenix. Intelligence update from control. Satellite surveillance has detected unusual vehicle activity near the Groom Lake perimeter. Recommend heightened alert status. Sullivan's voice carried a new tension. Phoenix, define unusual activity. Viper 2. Thermal imaging shows multiple vehicles in positions that would allow surveillance of aircraft operations, along with what appears to be sophisticated electronic equipment. Either we have very dedicated plane spotters, or someone is conducting organized reconnaissance. Morrison felt his pulse quicken. The presence of surveillance teams around Area 51 wasn't unprecedented. The facility attracted conspiracy theorists and aviation enthusiasts regularly. But sophisticated electronic equipment suggested something far more serious than civilian curiosity seekers. Phoenix, are we to abort criteria if hostile presence is confirmed? Negative, Viper 1. Mission is a critical priority. The data we're retrieving contains technical specifications that cannot be allowed to fall into enemy hands under any circumstances. As they approached the restricted airspace boundary, Morrison noticed something unusual on his radar display. Multiple aircraft were operating in the area, a more than would be typical for a routine day at Groom Lake. Phoenix, Viper 1 shows multiple air contacts in the target area. Can you confirm expected traffic? Viper 1, those contacts are part of the reason we're here. Intelligence suggests that unauthorized aircraft have been conducting surveillance overflights using transponder codes that identify them as civilian research flights. Morrison zoomed his display to get better resolution on the contacts. Several aircraft were maintaining patterns that looked suspiciously like surveillance orbits, rather than the direct flight paths typical of legitimate research missions. Phoenix, recommend we request vector updates from Groom Lake approach control. Viper 1, that's where our situation gets complicated. Communications with Groom Lake Control have been intermittent for the past 48 hours. Either they're experiencing equipment problems, or someone is jamming their frequencies. The implications were staggering. Groom Lake was one of the most secure facilities in the world, protected by multiple layers of electronic countermeasures and air defense systems. If someone could successfully jam their communications, it suggested capabilities that went far beyond typical espionage operations. Phoenix, what's our primary approach plan if we can't coordinate with facility control? Viper flight, we proceed with authentication protocol Bravo 7. I'll transmit identification codes that should clear us for approach, even without standard air traffic control coordination. As they descended toward Groom Lake, Morrison got his first clear view of the legendary facility. The runway complex was massive, designed to accommodate aircraft far larger than anything in the official Air Force inventory. Hangar structures dotted the landscape, many of them large enough to house aircraft the size of B-52 bombers. But what caught his attention were the vehicles. positioned around the facility perimeter. Through his targeting system, he could see that Amanda had been right. Multiple vehicles were arranged in positions that provided optimal surveillance coverage of the runway approaches. Phoenix, Viper 1 has visual confirmation of perimeter surveillance. Count 6 vehicles with apparent electronic equipment arrays. Copy, Viper 1. That matches intelligence estimates. Continue approach but maintain heightened alert posture. As Phoenix transmitted her authentication codes, Morrison monitored multiple radio frequencies for any indication of hostile activity. The response from Groom Lake was immediate and professional, clearing them for landing on the facility's primary runway. But as they descended through 5,000 feet, Morrison's electronic warfare systems detected something troubling. Phoenix, Viper 1 is detecting active radar tracking from multiple sources. Configuration suggests surface-to-air missile systems. Amanda's voice remained calm, but Morrison could hear the underlying tension. Viper 1, those systems are part of the facility's defensive network. However, intelligence indicates they may have been compromised by the same people conducting the surveillance operation. Morrison felt cold sweat, despite the controlled environment of his cockpit. Flying into an area where friendly air defense systems might have been turned against them represented a completely new category of threat. Phoenix, what's our defensive posture if we receive missile lock-on? Viper flight, rules of engagement are weapons tight unless we receive confirmed hostile action. However, be prepared for immediate evasive maneuvers if threat systems go active. As they approached the runway, Morrison could see that Groom Lake appeared to be operating normally. Ground personnel were visible around the hangar areas, and several aircraft were parked in positions that suggested routine operations. But his situational awareness was screaming warnings. Too many things were slightly wrong: the surveillance vehicles, the communications problems, the unusual air traffic, and now potentially compromised defensive systems. Phoenix, recommend we execute abbreviated ground time. Get the data and get out. Agreed. Viper 1, ground operations will be limited to essential personnel only. They touched down on the runway in formation, with Amanda's T-38 landing first, followed by the 2 F-22s. As they taxied toward the designated hangar area, Morrison noticed that the ground crews directing them were standard military uniforms but carried equipment he didn't recognize. Viper flight, something's not right here, Sullivan transmitted on their private frequency. Look at the ground personnel arrangements. Morrison studied the scene more carefully. The personnel were positioned in patterns that looked more like security formations than standard aircraft servicing arrangements. Several individuals were positioned with clear sight lines to potential approach routes, and their equipment appeared to be communication and surveillance gear rather than maintenance tools. Phoenix, Viper 1 observes unusual ground crew deployments. Recommend caution during engine shutdown procedures. Copy. Viper 1. Maintain engines at idle and be prepared for immediate departure if necessary. As they shut down their aircraft, Morrison could see Amanda emerge from her T-38 and walk toward the hangar complex with purposeful determination. She was met by a small group of personnel who appeared to be facility security officers, but something about their demeanor suggested they weren't entirely comfortable with the situation. Through his cockpit communication system, Morrison could monitor Amanda's radio transmissions as she coordinated with the facility personnel to retrieve the classified data. But after several minutes, her voice took on a tone of concern. Viper flight, Phoenix. The data repository shows signs of unauthorized access. Someone has been here before us. Morrison felt his stomach drop. Phoenix, define unauthorized access. Viper 1. The secure storage systems show electronic intrusion attempts over the past 72 hours. Some appear to have been successful. Sullivan keyed his mic. Phoenix, does that mean the F-35X data has been compromised? Unknown at this time, Viper 2. I'm conducting detailed analysis now. but preliminary indications suggest that critical technical specifications may have been copied. The implications were staggering. If enemy operatives had successfully penetrated one of the most secure facilities in the world and stolen F-35X technical data, the entire program was potentially compromised. Morrison was monitoring multiple radio frequencies when he detected something that made his blood run cold. On a frequency typically used for tactical communications, he heard brief transmissions in what sounded like coded language. Phoenix, Viper 1 is detecting tactical communications on frequency 2-4-7-.7-5. Unknown origin, coded transmissions. Viper 1, can you triangulate the source? Morrison activated his direction-finding equipment and watched as the bearing indicators pointed toward multiple locations around the facility perimeter. Phoenix, multiple transmission sources. Appears to be coordinated network communication. Viper Flight, Phoenix. I'm detecting similar communications through facility monitoring systems. Someone is conducting organized surveillance of our operation. Sullivan's voice was tight with tension. Phoenix, recommend immediate departure. This feels like preparation for hostile action. Amanda's response was immediate and decisive. Viper Flight, I concur. I'm securing what data I can retrieve and return to aircraft immediately. Prepare for an emergency departure. Morrison began his engine start procedures while maintaining visual surveillance of the surrounding area. Through his targeting systems, he could see that the surveillance vehicles around the perimeter had changed positions, moving to locations that would provide better observation of their departure routes. Phoenix, Viper 1 observes perimeter vehicle movement. Pattern suggests preparation for an interdiction attempt. Copy. Viper 1. Facility security is reporting unauthorized personnel approaching restricted areas. This operation has been compromised. As Amanda ran toward her T-38, Morrison could see facility security personnel taking defensive positions around the hangar areas. The situation was rapidly escalating from covert surveillance to potential armed confrontation. Viper Flight, Phoenix. I have partial data recovery, but we need to depart immediately. Intelligence suggests we may be facing coordinated ground and air threats. Morrison's threat warning system suddenly activated, indicating active radar locks from multiple sources. Phoenix, Viper 1 is spiked by multiple threat radars. SAM systems appear to be going active. Viper Flight, those are the facility defensive systems. If they've been compromised, we're about to become targets of our own air defense network. The situation had transformed from a covert data recovery mission into a desperate escape scenario. They were potentially facing hostile action from compromised defensive systems while unknown enemies, coordinated surveillance, and possible interdiction. Attempts. As Amanda reached her aircraft and began rapid start procedures, Morrison realized they were about to face the most dangerous 15 minutes of their military careers. Piercing wail of threat, warning alarms filled Morrison's cockpit as multiple surface-to-air missile systems locked onto their aircraft simultaneously. Red warning lights bathed his instrument panel in an ominous glow as the F-22's defensive systems automatically began deploying countermeasures. Viper Flight, Phoenix. SAM systems are going hot. Repeat, surface-to-air missiles are active and tracking. Execute emergency departure immediately. Morrison's hands moved with trained precision, pushing his throttles to maximum military power while simultaneously releasing the wheel brakes. The F-22 surged forward, its twin engines producing a thunderous roar that echoed off the hangar structures surrounding them. Viper 2. Engaging afterburners. Stay tight on my 6. Sullivan's voice cut through the radio static as his aircraft accelerated alongside Morrison's. Amanda's T-38 was already airborne, climbing steeply away from the runway with a departure angle that would have been impossible for most aircraft. But Morrison could see she was pushing the trainer to its absolute performance limits. trading altitude for distance from the compromised ground-based threats. Phoenix, Viper flight is airborne. Multiple missile launches detected. Through his heads-up display, Morrison could see the terrifying sight of surface-to-air missiles rising from positions around Groom Lake. The distinctive, white exhaust trails of at least 4 missiles were visible against the clear Nevada sky, each one tracking toward their formation with deadly precision. Viper flight. Execute defensive pattern Delta. Chaff and flare deployment authorized. Morrison threw his F-22 into a violent left turn while simultaneously deploying clouds of metallic chaff designed to confuse the missile's radar guidance systems. The G-forces pressed him deep into his ejection seat as the aircraft's flight computer automatically adjusted the control surfaces to maintain flight stability. During the extreme maneuver, Sullivan's F-22 mirrored the defensive pattern, turning hard right while releasing infrared flares that burned like miniature suns against the morning sky. The two Raptors separated by several miles, forcing any pursuing missiles to choose between multiple targets. Viper 1, I have missile separation. 2 weapons tracking you. 2 tracking Viper 2. Morrison's defensive systems were working frantically to defeat the incoming threats. His radar warning receiver was screaming with multiple threat indications as the missile's guidance systems tried to maintain lock, despite the electronic countermeasures and chaff clouds. Phoenix, what's the status of facility air defenses? Are we dealing with compromised friendly systems or hostile SAM sites? Amanda's voice was strained but controlled as she maneuvered her T-38 through evasive patterns. Viper 1. Intelligence indicates the facility's Patriot missile batteries were hacked sometime in the past 48 hours. The systems are firing on legitimate aircraft using corrupted identification, friend or foe protocols. The implications were staggering. Someone had successfully penetrated the computer systems controlling some of America's most advanced air defense weapons and reprogrammed them to attack American aircraft. This level of cyber warfare capability suggested enemies with resources that rivaled those of major nation-states. Morrison watched his threat display as one of the missiles tracking him lost lock and detonated harmlessly several miles behind his aircraft. But the second missile was still closing, its radar seeker head apparently immune to his electronic countermeasures. Viper 2, I still have 1 missile in pursuit. Cannot break the lock. Sullivan's voice crackled through the radio. Viper 1, I'm clear of my threats. Coming around to assist, Morrison continued his violent evasive maneuvers, pulling his F-22 through turns that approached the aircraft's structural limits. The missile was closing rapidly, and his defensive systems were running out of countermeasures to deploy. Phoenix, Viper 1 needs immediate assistance. The missile is still tracking hot. Viper 1, turn hard left bearing 270. I have an idea. Morrison didn't hesitate, throwing his aircraft into the commanded turn despite not understanding Amanda's plan. As he rolled out on the new heading, he found himself flying directly toward one of the mountain ranges that surrounded Groom Lake. Phoenix, this heading will take me into terrain. Viper 1, trust me. Maintain current heading and altitude until I give you the word. Through his canopy, Morrison could see the rocky peaks of the mountain range, growing larger with alarming speed. Flying toward terrain while being pursued by a surface-to-air missile violated every survival instinct he possessed, but Amanda's tone suggested she had a specific plan in mind. Viper 1, on my mark, executes maximum rate dive toward the valley floor. Mark. Morrison pushed his control stick forward and pulled his throttles back simultaneously, causing the F-22 to dive toward the narrow valley that cut between 2 mountain peaks. The missile, committed to its intercept course, couldn't match the sudden change in flight path and detonated against the mountainside in a spectacular explosion that lit up the morning sky. Viper 1 is clear of the missile threat. Phoenix, that was brilliant flying. Viper 1, terrain masking is a basic test pilot technique. The missile's guidance system couldn't adjust fast enough to follow you into the valley. As Morrison climbed back to a safe altitude, he realized they had survived only the first phase of what was clearly a coordinated attack. His radar display showed multiple air contacts approaching their position from several directions. Viper Flight, Phoenix. I'm detecting inbound aircraft from the east and south. Configuration suggests fighter intercept. Sullivan's voice carried a new tension. Phoenix, are we talking about more compromised friendly aircraft or actual hostile fighters? Unknown at this time, Viper 2, but given the sophistication of today's attack, I recommend we assume hostile intent until proven otherwise. Morrison studied his radar display more carefully. The approaching aircraft were maintaining formations and altitudes consistent with fighter intercept patterns, and they appeared to be closing at high speed. Phoenix. Viper 1 shows 4 contacts from the east. Altitude Angels 25, range 60 miles in closing. 2 additional contacts from the south, similar parameters. Copy. Viper 1. Those aircraft are not showing on any flight plan filed with Regional Air Traffic Control. Recommend we classify as unknown hostile until identification is confirmed. The tactical situation was becoming increasingly complex. They were potentially facing air-to-air threats while still within range of the compromised surface-to-air missile systems. Around Groom Lake, standard fighter tactics called for gaining altitude and speed to maximize their engagement options, but doing so might expose them to additional SAM threats. Phoenix, recommend we aggress the area immediately. We're outnumbered and facing threats from multiple vectors. Agreed. Viper 1. But first we need to determine if those are compromised American aircraft or actual foreign fighters operating in U.S. airspace. Amanda's T-38 began climbing toward the approaching contacts while Morrison and Sullivan maintained protective positions nearby. As they closed the distance, the aircraft identification systems began providing more detailed information about the unknown contacts. Viper Flight, Phoenix. IFF systems are showing the eastern contacts as F-16 Fighting Falcons, but the southern contacts are not producing valid identification codes. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. F-16s with valid identification codes suggested American aircraft, possibly scrambled from a nearby Air Force base in response to the emergency at Groom Lake, but aircraft without proper identification codes in restricted airspace represented a clear threat. Phoenix, how do we determine if the F-16s are friendly or compromised? Viper 1, we're going to have to risk direct communication. If they're friendly, they'll respond with proper authentication codes. If they're compromised, they may attempt to engage. Amanda switched to the standard air-to-air frequency used for intercept operations. Unknown aircraft bearing 090 from Groom Lake. This is Phoenix Flight. Identify yourself and state your intentions. The response came immediately, and Morrison recognized the professional tone of an experienced Air Force pilot. Phoenix Flight. This is Falcon Flight out of Luke Air Force Base. We were scrambled in response to reports of missile launches in your area. Are you friendly? Falcon Flight, Phoenix. We are friendly, conducting classified operations under Special Programs Authority. The authentication code is Delta Charlie 77. Phoenix Flight, Falcon. Your authentication code is confirmed. Be advised we were told to expect possible hostile aircraft in this area. What's your tactical situation? Amanda's relief was evident in her voice. Falcon Flight, we have just egressed from Groom Lake under hostile fire from compromised surface-to-air missile systems. We also have unidentified aircraft approaching from the south without proper IFF codes. Phoenix Flight, Falcon. We have the southern contacts on radar. No flight plan on file, no response to air traffic control queries. Recommend we investigate. Morrison watched as the 4 F-16s from Luke Air Force Base maneuvered to intercept the unknown aircraft approaching from the south. The tactical advantage had suddenly shifted in their favor. Instead of being outnumbered 6-3, they now had 4 additional friendly fighters to help deal with the unidentified threats. Falcon Flight Phoenix. The unknown aircraft may be part of a coordinated attack against classified operations. Use extreme caution in your approach. Phoenix Falcon Leader. We're trained for this. Falcon Flight, weapons tight until I give the word. As the F-16s closed with the unknown aircraft, Morrison could see through his long-range sensors that the unidentified contacts were changing course and altitude in patterns consistent with evasive maneuvering. Phoenix Flight, Falcon Leader. Unknown contacts are turning away and descending rapidly. They appear to be attempting to leave U.S. airspace. Falcon Leader Phoenix. Do not let them escape. Those aircraft may contain intelligence operatives responsible for compromising Groom Lake security systems. Chase sequence that followed unfolded across hundreds of square miles of Nevada and California airspace. The unknown aircraft demonstrated flight characteristics and performance that surprised even the experienced F-16 pilots. Phoenix, Falcon 2. These bogies are flying aircraft I don't recognize. Performance is similar to F-16s, but the radar signatures are all wrong. Morrison realized they were facing something unprecedented: foreign military aircraft operating in American airspace with capabilities that rivaled or exceeded current U.S. fighters. Falcon Flight Phoenix. You are authorized to use necessary force to prevent those aircraft from leaving U.S. airspace. National Security Classification Alpha. The radio chatter that followed indicated the F-16 pilots were engaging the unknown aircraft with air-to-air missiles. Morrison could see the distant flashes of weapons launches and detonations as the aerial battle played out across the desert. Sky, Phoenix Flight, Falcon Leader. Splash 2 bogies. Remaining contacts have crossed into Mexican airspace and are no longer within our engagement envelope. Amanda's voice carried both satisfaction and concern. Falcon Leader Phoenix. Excellent work. But this confirms our worst fears. We're dealing with foreign military aircraft conducting operations inside U.S. borders. As they turned toward Nellis Air Force Base, Morrison realized that their mission had uncovered something far more serious than data theft. They had discovered evidence of foreign military penetration into some of America's most secure facilities, supported by advanced aircraft and cyber warfare capabilities that suggested a level of coordination between multiple hostile intelligence services. Phoenix Viper 1. What's our next move? Amanda's response was grim but determined. Viper Flight, we're going to brief General Webb on what we've discovered, and then we're going to find out exactly how deep this conspiracy goes. The secure briefing room at Nellis Air Force Base was filled with tension as Morrison, Sullivan, and Amanda faced a panel of the highest-ranking military and intelligence officials either of them had ever seen in one place. General Webb sat at the center of the table, flanked by a Navy admiral, an Army general, and 2 civilians whose presence suggested involvement from the highest levels of national security apparatus. Colonel Torres, General Webb began. Your preliminary report indicates we're facing a coordinated international operation with capabilities that exceed our previous threat assessments. Please provide your detailed analysis. Amanda stood and activated the main display screen. Instead of technical diagrams, it now showed a complex web of connections linking various incidents across multiple continents. Gentlemen, what we discovered today represents the most sophisticated intelligence operation ever conducted against the United States. The attack on our Cessna was not an isolated assassination attempt. It was part of a coordinated campaign designed to steal the F-35X technology while simultaneously demonstrating that our most secure facilities are vulnerable to penetration. One of the civilians leaned forward. Colonel, explain how foreign military aircraft were able to operate in restricted U.S. airspace without detection. Sir, Analysis of today's engagement suggests the aircraft were using advanced stealth technology combined with electronic warfare systems that could spoof our identification friend or foe protocols. They weren't just invisible to our radars. They were actively impersonating authorized aircraft. Morrison felt a chill as the implications became clear. Ma'am, are you saying they could have been conducting operations in U.S. airspace for an extended period without detection? Captain Morrison, that's exactly what I'm saying. Review of radar data from the past 6 months shows dozens of contacts that were assumed to be routine civilian or military traffic, but now appear to have been foreign reconnaissance flights. The Admiral spoke for the first time. Colonel, what's the strategic assessment? Are we looking at preparation for military action or extended intelligence gathering? Amanda changed the display to show a global map with marked locations. Sir, based on the technical capabilities demonstrated and the coordination required, this operation appears designed to achieve 2 objectives: steal American technological advantages and demonstrate that our defensive systems can be compromised at will. General Webb's expression was grim. Colonel, in your assessment, how successful have they been? General, the partial data I recovered from Groom Lake indicates they've obtained approximately 60% of the F-35X technical specifications. More critically, they've demonstrated the ability to compromise our most secure facilities and turn our own defensive systems against us. Sullivan spoke up from his position at the table. Sir, what's our response going to be? We can't allow foreign powers to operate military aircraft in American airspace, one of the civilians answered. Lieutenant, that's where the situation becomes more complex. The aircraft we engaged today were not operating under the flag of any recognized nation. They appear to be part of a private military organization with access to advanced technology and significant financial resources. Morrison frowned. Sir, private military organizations don't typically have access to stealth fighters and advanced cyber warfare capabilities. Captain, that's correct under normal circumstances. But intelligence analysis suggests we're dealing with a consortium that includes rogue elements from multiple national intelligence services, combined with private defense contractors who have access to technologies that rival our own classified programs. Amanda activated a new display showing financial and communication intercepts. Gentlemen, the organization behind today's attack calls itself Prometheus Group. Analysis indicates it includes former intelligence operatives from Russia, China, and several other nations, along with defense industry personnel who have had access to classified American military programs. The scope of the revelation was staggering. Morrison realized they weren't just dealing with foreign espionage. They were facing a completely new category of threat that combined the key resources of nation-states with the flexibility and deniability of private organizations. Colonel Torres, the Admiral continued, what's your recommendation for protecting the remaining F-35X technology and personnel? Sir, traditional security measures are inadequate against this level of threat. The Prometheus Group has demonstrated the ability to penetrate our most secure facilities, compromise our defensive systems, and conduct military operations in U.S. airspace. We need to assume that every aspect of the F-35X program has been exposed. General Webb leaned back in his chair. Colonel, are you recommending we abort the F-35X program? Amanda's expression became determined. No, sir. I'm recommending we use it as bait. The room fell silent as the implications of her suggestion became clear. Morrison felt his pulse quicken as he realized what Amanda was proposing. Ma'am, you're suggesting we deliberately expose F-35X operations to draw out Prometheus Group. Captain Morrison, I'm suggesting we conduct what appears to be a critical F-35X test flight, but actually use it as a counterintelligence operation designed to identify and eliminate Prometheus Group's operational capabilities. One of the civilians shook his head. Colonel, That would require risking the most advanced fighter aircraft ever developed as bait in what amounts to a trap operation. Sir, the F-35X technology is already compromised. Prometheus Group has most of the technical specifications, and they've demonstrated the capability to attack our facilities at will. Our choice is between risking one aircraft in a controlled operation, or allowing them to continue stealing our technological advantages with impunity. General Webb studied the tactical display for several minutes before speaking. Colonel, outline your proposed operation. Amanda changed the display to show a detailed mission profile. We announce a critical F-35X test flight from Edwards Air Force Base, with enough operational security leaks to ensure Prometheus Group becomes aware of it. We use the actual F-35X prototype as bait, but support it with sufficient assets to engage and destroy any hostile response. Morrison studied the mission profile and felt his breath catch. Ma'am, you're planning to pilot the F-35X yourself? Captain, I'm the only pilot with sufficient experience in the aircraft to execute combat maneuvers while maintaining the operational facade. Captain Morrison and Lieutenant Sullivan will provide escort and modified F-22s with enhanced electronic warfare capabilities. Sullivan looked skeptical. Colonel, what makes you think the Prometheus Group will take the bait? Lieutenant, because they've invested too much in this operation to allow the F-35X program to continue. If they believe we're conducting critical test flights, they'll be forced to attack or risk losing their opportunity to steal the remaining technology. The Admiral leaned forward. Colonel, what's the timeline for this operation? Sir, intelligence indicates Prometheus Group is planning a major operation within the next 72 hours. If we're going to use the F-35X as bait, it has to be immediately. General Webb stood and walked to the display screen. Gentlemen, this operation represents significant risk, but Colonel Torres is correct that traditional defensive measures have proven inadequate. The question is whether we're prepared to risk our most advanced military technology in what amounts to a combat operation against an enemy whose capabilities we don't fully understand. Morrison felt the weight of the decision pressing down on the room. Everything they had learned suggested that Prometheus Group possessed resources and capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about national security and military technology. General, Amanda said quietly, there's one more factor to consider. Analysis of the foreign aircraft we engaged today indicates they were using technology that appears to be derived from stolen F-35X specifications. Prometheus Group isn't just stealing our technology. They're already building weapons, systems based on it. The implications were staggering. Morrison realized that America's technological military advantages were being systematically stolen and potentially turned against the United States. Colonel Torres, General Webb said finally, prepare your operation. Captain Morrison, Lieutenant Sullivan, you're authorized for immediate deployment to Edwards Air Force Base. This mission is classified at the highest possible levels, and failure is not an option. As the briefing concluded and they prepared to leave, Amanda approached Morrison and Sullivan privately. Gentlemen, I need you both to understand something. The aircraft we're going to be flying represents technology that could change the balance of global military power. The people we're going to face tomorrow have already killed to get this technology, and they won't hesitate to kill again. Morrison met her gaze steadily. Ma'am, we understood the risks when we agreed to participate in this operation. Captain, tomorrow you're going to see the future of air combat. The F-35X isn't just a better fighter, it's a completely different category of weapon. What you witnessed today was just the beginning. As they walked toward their aircraft for the flight to Edwards Air Force Base, Morrison realized that their encounter with Amanda Torres, the woman who had appeared to be just a passenger on a disabled business jet, had drawn them into a conflict that would determine whether America maintained its technological Military advantages are lost them to enemies who operated in the shadows between nations. Tomorrow, they would find out whether the future of American air superiority could be protected, or whether the most advanced military technology ever developed would fall into the hands of those who sought to use it against the very nation that created it. The stakes couldn't be higher, and there would be no second chances. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.